I'm appalled at some of the pushback that has been so strong. I got no problem with pushback. I do have a problem when it gets personal.
Yes.
And it's basically throwing the kitchen sink.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Off the Track Podcast, daily racing form interview series, where we go beyond the handicapping and the past performances. This week, we got the chance to chat with Terry Finley, the CEO and the founder of West Point Thoroughbreds. They are the largest thoroughbred partnership company in the world. And we talked all about the journey for Terry, growing up, being a fan of horse racing, loving horses, going to the Army, and that's where West Point came from and West Point Thoroughbreds came from. Meeting his wife, Debbie, and them teaming up together in 1991 on a $5,000 claimer, and how that blossomed into West Point Thoroughbreds, winning the Kentucky Derby, winning the Breeders' Cup Classic, horses like Flightline, and so much history to discuss with Terry Finley. Terry, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're a busy man. You've got a lot going on.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk about thoroughbred racing and about the game in general.
So after already having, 30 years plus in the books, what was it like to set all of the records last year in 2024 in a year when you didn't have a Breeders' Cup Classic winner, you didn't have a Kentucky Derby winner, but you're still setting records as a partnership? To me, that was really impressive and kind of showed how from top to bottom, the quality and the quantity of horses you have.
Yeah, Gino. Um, Obviously it's about winning races, and you win races by putting together a good team and getting horses, and really putting them in the right hands. But it all starts with the horses, and all starts at the sales. In our case, we don't really breed that much, we breed some, but so that's really the start. The start is going to the sales, and then getting partners to trust us and invest with us, and then really doing the blocking and tackling to get them into the right hands and into the right spots to win races. So it's pretty easy if you're standing in the winner's circle, but there are a lot of things that go into it, obviously.
And we'll hit on your team in just a moment, because that's always with a big operation, you have to have so many moving parts and so many people helping you out. From a number standpoint, is there something that you are looking for with an amount of horses that you have, or is it just kind of, is there a number that you want, or is there a number that you think is too many? How many horses do you have about right now?
Yeah, we have about 150 in total. So, it's a big operation. We enjoy it until we get to the end of the month and we get the bills from everybody. But everybody's got put food on their table, and we'd like to think that we're dealing with the highest caliber of people, really across the spectrum. So that's not an inexpensive proposition. In response to your question, I don't know. I don't know. We don't really look at it as numbers as
Sure.
much as trying to put ourselves into good spots, especially with outside partners. Um, and when we do that, we have a shot to get to the big days and the big dances. And of course, that's what we're trying to do. But it's also about the everyday horses that aren't superstars, but can still really provide their partners a lot of enjoyment and sizzle in our game. So it's a balancing act. And look, I don't think we're going to double in the next 5 years like we have in the last 5 years, but we'll kind of keep it real. We'll stay true to our principles, and we'll see what happens. Right? It's all about attracting people who want to invest and really partner with us.
Have you changed your mindset about what you wanted West Point to be through the years more now? Just kind of seems like the game's changing a little bit also, right? In the 30 years that you've been in there, it's evolving into more partnerships, things like that, and where you're working with other big ownership groups. Is that something like a mindset that changed? Because you sort of start with a group of friends going in on a couple of horses back in 1991, I believe.
Yep. Yep. So this is our 34th year. We won our first race 34 years ago today. So it's
Wow.
really ironic that we're talking. So I remember that day specifically.
Sunbelt, is that right?
Um, it was Sunbelt, and I was on temporary duty in the Army. I was just ready to get out of the Army, and I was out at Fort Lewis. And I remember I called my wife. She was at the racetrack. You probably remember there was a point where you couldn't use cell phones, and you couldn't phone, because they locked the the phone booth, so you had to go outside. And I knew as soon as she called me, she said two words that we had won. So that started the journey. And I that's a question that's asking me a lot. No, of course I would not have thought about that. I was really just trying to establish myself and to see where it took the organization. And man, it's been a lot of fun. It's been very intriguing. And I think some people say when they're an entrepreneur and they build an organization, they say, well, the building was even more fun than the times when you have the success, and it's I'd say more widespread. I've enjoyed them both. The enjoyment is a little bit different than it was when I was trying to do everything that a younger entrepreneur does, like paying payroll and trying to pay for horses, and all that stuff. But man, but to your point, with the game changing, I've always thought that it was important for a person like me and for an organization like West Point to try to be part of that change, and to really, while we know there's never going to be one voice that dominates the industry, although some try to. We know that that's not the structure of our business, and we can talk about that obviously. But I've always wanted to have West Point be part of the dialogue and trying to be part of, steering our industry into the years ahead. And look, we've got our business has changed so dramatically. I shake my head thinking about another industry that has changed as dramatically as ours. I'm sure there are some, but I mean, this is the only industry I've ever been in, and the changes have been really substantive. And look, we all got to work every day to make a better future. That's really at the core of what we all need to do.
When I was doing some of the research for our conversation, I came across an article, and there was a quote from the late Cot Campbell, who started Dogwood Stables, and he was talking about West Point Thoroughbreds. He called West Point one of the most highly respected and dominant outfits in the history of partnerships. You don't hear anybody knocking Terry Finley. And for those who may not know, he was a pioneer for bringing in shareholders and having them buy equity in a horse back when it was just one owner. It was usually just big families and big groups of just one owner. And he was kind of the first
Yeah.
person to bring everybody in. And that's something that we see the models built on right now. Did you, I mean, you're kind of taking from what he was doing early on and building upon that model.
Absolutely. I shudder to think what our industry would be like today if Cot Campbell wasn't around and he stuck to the advertising firm that he ran really successfully in Atlanta in the 60s. And um, well, Stuart Janney said one day, at a at a symposium, and I think he's correct. We're not very nice to new people in our business. Like, we all think that, oh, you're new, you don't know what's going on.
We're
We
better than
know.
you. Yeah.
Well, we know better than you, and we kind of, I say we as an industry, we kind of transfer that vibe. And it's a bad deal, right? It's a bad deal because people that have the wherewithal, that have built, well, I mean, some people, they get it from their parents or their grandparents, but most people now, they've earned it. They've earned their hard-earned dollars. And when they're looking to invest, they want to be comfortable. And I mean, who really wants to be in a position where they're looked at like, you don't know what you're doing or what you're talking about? And so I think that's been one of the things that I took from Cot Campbell. Cott really worked on the education of people and bringing them into the fold and really creating a community. And so I took a lot from him. And I'll tell you a very quick, funny story. It was
Please.
in the early '90s. We were just kind of getting going, and we were starting to kind of pick up some momentum. And I called Cott one day. I tracked him down in Aiken, South Carolina, and I said, the September sale's coming up. It was probably like the Friday before the start. And I said, I'd love to break bread with you and buy you breakfast. He said, Terry, I've gotten to know you a little bit. We'll have coffee, but we're not having breakfast. So he basically said, like, I'll be friends, but you're a competitor. And I just thought that encapsulated him. He was a true gentleman. And listen, he paid it forward. And I said to myself 25 years ago, I want to be nice to the younger guys that are partners, or that run partnerships, and I want to help them. Look, I, I'd like to have all the business, but I know that's not reality. There's a big pie, and the more partnerships that we have, the better it is for the industry as a whole. And I think when you reach 61 years old and you've been hard at it for 34 years, you realize, like, it's not just about us and about me. It's really about this industry and a higher calling to do everything we can to help the industry. So I just offer that to owners across the spectrum. Like, be nice to new people. It is really helpful for the industry as in general.
One of the real selling points for West Point, for partnerships, groups like this, is you can team up with your friends and your family. And you have built an incredible team at West Point that kind of models that, where it starts with your wife and your business partner that you met early in life. Do you remember some of your early conversations with her about horse racing, way before everything started?
Yeah, I do, Gino. And we used to go to the races. We grew up right near Philadelphia Park. At that time, it was Keystone, uh, and then Philadelphia Park, and then Parks. So, we she really took a liking to it very early, because I had been around the business as a kid, and I think it would be very difficult to be as focused on the industry and really 24/7 as almost all of us are, without a spouse that
Yeah.
was very understanding and who liked the business too.
Yep.
I don't think she loves every aspect of it like I do. Um, and I love the vast majority of the aspects of it, but it'd be very difficult. And I feel bad for people who desperately want to get into the business. They get into a partnership and their spouse doesn't like it, and it's like, oh,
It's a push and
you
pull.
know, and look, that's their prerogative, but it's a lot better when both spouses really kind of join forces into the game, and that's what happened with me with Debbie.
And when both spouses are on the same page, you have a child like Erin who can become your COO. And she has done a lot of different things in the industry. She's very, very well experienced. But when did she become your COO and an like official part of the team?
Yeah, so she graduated from the UK in 2009, and then really came right on board. And so she started, and she was an assistant to the communications director at that point, and then just learned the business. And I think more so than anything, and like I know you have to kind of clear through, but the trainers really respect her, and because they know that she's well prepared and she's well versed on things, and she's very much based on common sense. So as she grew and we added responsibility, she showed that she had what it took to really run the company. And what it's done for me is really given me a chance to focus on the September sale and the 2-year-old sales, and partners, right? The administrative stuff, while I love technology, and I think the company has really come forward in a lot of ways, that's her baby now. And she's got 3 kids. She lives on a farm with horses and chickens and dogs. So she's got a lot on her plate, but she's really dedicated to West Point and has had a huge impact on our success. Because if you look at her ascent and the growth of our company, they're basically in sync.
Yeah.
And I do I just I shudder to think if she ever said she's married to a dentist who does very well. He's an entrepreneurial dentist, and I shudder to think at some point in the future she's going to say, I want to do something else. And I hope that's a long way into the future. But she's part of a very good team for sure.
In reading some of Aaron's comments and in listening to some previous interviews with you, it seemed like Bloodstock agent David Ngordo was coming in was something that was a big a moment for you guys as well. Talk to us a little bit about that relationship and some of the horses he's found and how that all came about.
Yeah. So um, so David obviously is a major player in the industry, and when we joined forces in 2017, I basically had the sense that we we did not, Aaron and I and another one of our salespeople really were the buying team, and I thought we were at a disadvantage because we weren't hands on, and we weren't um, you know at the farms, and we weren't kind of in the flow of the Lexington world, so to speak. And I thought that we would benefit from that. And I know one thing I learned early is you can't be everything to everybody. You can't do everything. And so I think I see some people, whether they have the too big of an ego,
That yep.
or they don't have the resources. Usually it's ego, but they want to take all the credit when things are good, and they want to dish out the blame when things aren't so good. So, um, I that's never been me. I've never had a problem with, I think there's when you have success, it's really fun to share it. And when you don't have success, you figure out what to do and you move forward. And I think that's been one of the big things is we turn the page. We don't look back. We don't harbor, we don't fester on things that haven't gone right. Right, because we know everybody's trying hard and everybody's aligned. We try to win races. So anyway, in 2017, David came aboard and he gave us access to Lane's End and to other big owners, and we were able to form these partnerships. And in 2019, we bought Flightline at the Saratoga sale. So that put us into another stratosphere. And so look, I understand like people they run their business, and I'd like to think that we're a significant part of the David and Gordo operation. I don't think I know we are, and we get along great together. We don't get in each other's way. We're we're we People always ask me what happens when David has this client and that client. I said it works out. And they said, "Well, what does that mean?" I said, "It works out because we don't get tense about it. It's gonna all kind of, the tide goes out and the tide comes in. There are plenty of horses to buy, and we know that when we do the work and we're working hard, we get the list, we divvy it up, and we go on about our business. So we don't fret a single iota about the other clients, and we stay out of each other's way until we come together. And I think we bought some nice horses. We made mistakes, but if you're not making mistakes in this business, you're not trying. And so, in some respects, mistakes are learning elements that we really do focus on, because you know it's a tough business, and we're dealing with against people with a lot of capital. But it is it is fun as hell, as we all know.
And you put together like the who's who of trainers. When you look at some of the trainers who have had West Point horses through the years: Asmussen, Mark Casse, Brad Cox, Shug McGahee, John Sadler, Miguel Clement, Romans, Dallas Stewart, Cherie DeVoe, Delacour, Bill Omott, Todd Pletcher, Tom Morley. That's just some. And we can't forget all of their incredible assisted trainers, grooms, valets. They're all part of the teams. How do you decide who goes where? I'm curious about that process, right? Like which trainer gets which horses, or are the owners part of that process as well? The group, how does that all go down?
Yeah, it um, it really depends on the horse. So
Sure.
if we have a not this time, and so Dale Romans, who's actually a really good buddy of ours and mine, and we've been active on the political side of the business and trying to help out in any number of ways. I think he's one of the leaders of the horsemen. He's a leading voice because he's level-headed. And but anyway, if we have a not this time, we're probably going to go to Dale because
Sure.
there's a link there. Um, and so there's some other horses that would fit.
Yeah, just
If
kind
we
of
have
who
a
has
horse
maybe
that we
experience with some of the previous horses, family,
in
pedigree,
the
things like that.
pedigree,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And look, I mean, Steve Asmussen. We were talking about the situation today. He has the advantage of really shipping all across the country.
yeah.
East of the Mississippi. So with the right horse, he's in the best hands with Steve. And but Shug is going to give them some time, and he's not looking to go 5/8 at Saratoga at the beginning of the meet. And so you put all those things together, and you take into account the partners or the prospective partners, and um, we kind of we work through it, and it's a little bit of science, it's a little bit of art. But what I think we've tried to do is we've really tried to have the trainers' backs. So if they go on a cold streak, which inevitably they do,
Yep.
or you know something doesn't go right, you know, I tell them, I'm not going to get mad at you about anything except if you are managing me and the partners and not the horse. And so that's what I want trainers to do, is to manage the horse, and I don't want them to be thinking about partners and about me. I said that's what we do. And so, and the reason is because we have to compete against the best owners. A lot of them are individual owners, and a lot of them are very, very surgical with their moves and their tactics. And if you don't adopt those tactics of, when a horse needs to run for 50, doesn't matter if you paid 500 for him, you got to run him for 50. And so we've gotten better at that. But I always like to say, like, if you're on our team, Terry Finley has your back, and I'd like to think that's made a difference over the years.
And that team continues to grow. CFO Lindsey Human, Tom Bellhouse. We have a CMO, Director of Communications, Jason Blewett, who a lot of us knew from On Air. He's over as part of the team. You have concierge. I was speaking with Casey, who is helping set this interview up. He does a great job as
Yes.
well. Allie, Joe. I just wanted to mention some of them because what I really love to see from you guys, Terry, is how um, great of a job you've done at social media, and that feels like that's a big important part of providing those owners with the information that they want daily, right? These are owners that are spending big money. They want to know what's going on with their horses day in, day out. And you have an entire team and different people who are actually taking care of that. That's their role, just to make sure that the owners are happy. They're always getting updated. And then that keeps the trainer doing what you just said, working on the horses, and it gives all of your team the opportunity to communicate with the owners and the partners.
Yes, it is. The experience you talk about, Jason Blewett, by the way, I always tell him, he he spent 6 or 7 years at Gulfstream at the simulcast announcer or host. And I say, up at Saratoga, I say, if you don't start doing your job better, I'm going to send you back to Gulfstream in the middle of August. You're going to be handicapping, and you're going to be trying to walk through a 62.5
Yep,
9.3
on the synthetic.
lifetime. And so keep it up. But yeah, it's really about structure, and that's what happens when people. I'll put a partnership together. I won't charge as much as West Point, and then it's all about resources. And we like to think that we have a large staff, but every week, every single one of our partners is going to get a full and very straightforward update on their horse, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And they're going to have people at the racetrack, and hopefully we're gonna increase the number of times that they just have a great experience. I was about ready to say, we cut down on the number of times that the tickets aren't there or whatever. But I go to the positive.
Yeah.
We want as many excellent days as possible for our partners, and they develop friendships and they end up buying horses together. And so look, it's a community, but it has to be nurtured. And yeah, we believe that you have to allocate the resources, and that's what people are investing in, and that's the the cost of the investment is into those people and those systems and that technology. And it's not for everybody, but it's for a lot of people. And we like to think that we have people coming back to us year after year because they like the transparency, they like the rigor that we operate in, and they like our you know the ability for us to put really good prospects in front of them every year.
Let's go back in time a little bit. Let's hop in our DeLorean and go back to the very beginning. Did you get a chance when you were younger to go to the races at all? And how does that bug kind of come in for you where you become a racing fan?
Yep. Yeah. So I did. So my father was a school teacher, and we used to go to the races all the time. And I started working as a young kid, um, on a racehorse farm over in Colts Neck, New Jersey, a place that was called Sunny Acres. Not there anymore, but I was very comfortable like around horses. And I always talk about, you can tell somebody that's very comfortable around horses. You can also tell somebody on the other end of the spectrum
Yep.
when they're not comfortable. But I always had it in my blood. So I went to West Point and spent 8 years in the Army. And I just um, I just was like, man, if I ever get lucky enough to have a chance to get back, step back into the game, and then as a next step, figure out how I might be able to stay in the game. And I knew I wasn't going to be a trainer because I was, I started too late. But I harken back to Cot Campbell. He was a great role model for me as well as a lot of other people. So thank you, Cot. I know you're up in heaven. Um, and then we just started building and doing the blocking and really tackling. But it all started as a kid when I got around horses and I was able to, to touch them and feel them. And we all talk about our love for horses, but they're noble creatures, and they rely on us for basically every. I'm talking about racehorses. They rely on humans for basically every part of their lives, and certainly it's incumbent upon us um, to meet that responsibility in as good of a way as possible.
So post army, you're graduating. You moved to Germany, right? You kind of travel a little all over with your family. Give us one of your favorite spots that you were in Europe.
Yeah, so I remember going to France. I remember going to the Palace of Versailles, um, and I just that's obviously they've had a lot of special things in the history uh, of France that happened in the palace. It's a beautiful place, and you have the link to horse racing because you go to Kentucky, you go to Lexington, and it's for sales. I
Yep.
said, no, it's Versailles. No, it's for sales. So I don't know how that transposed, but yeah, we were in our early 20s. We were married, and I was a I was a first lieutenant in the Army. So we got a shot to travel and to ski in Austria and Switzerland and St. Moritz. And we basically went all over Europe at that time, right? Because we thought that the Cold War was over or was ready to be over, and that it was, I'd like to say not as intense. The operational intensity was certainly not what it is now, back in the mid to late 80s. So it was a good time to be an Army officer for sure.
Then you come back to the US and we talked about your first start as an owner and that $5,000 claiming race at Philly Park. And you're starting to get some friends together and kind of putting together your early partnerships. What do you remember about the first 91 to about 2000 when you're building
Yep.
everything up, right? What was that process like for you?
Yeah. So I do remember that in the early '90s, I got to be friends with a Vietnam vet. Harry Miller is his name, and he's still at Keeneland as an usher. But he ran advertising for the Blood Horse. So I started to do some advertising. But one day I remember specifically, Gino, he called me and he said, "Hey, I was just in a meeting and they got this new a division in our company. New media is what they're calling it, and they've got this thing called the World Wide Web. So I told the leader to give you a call. You might be interested." And so it, as I said, I had always liked technology in the army. I know in the mid '80s, um, I had had a cell phone out in the field, and it was the first one of the first ones, satellite phones. So I was like, man, this our technology might be starting to advance a little bit, and the PCs were just coming aboard. So I was like, I want to be part of this. So we basically had seriously in 1993 one of the first websites in the industry, and we put a matrix up. We had 6 or 7 horses, and I'd fax every week.
Wow.
Right, scribbled all the updates for the horses, and they would at the Blood Horse they would do that, and then like a year later they had a program that you could basically update your own website. And I'll say there, I said, there'll never be a better thing in all of technology than to be able to update your own website. And so I think technology and Harry Miller
Embracing it,
at
right?
the Blood Horse, yeah, yeah, and so when you embrace something and you really are intrigued by it, and then all of a sudden you're starting to see, hey, this can impact the my company and the industry, everything just kind of started to build from there.
In listening to you talk a few different times and in just knowing some people from West Point, it seems like from early on you've had similar mentality, and if you continue to stay consistent, I think the people will respect you. You win at the biggest level, they'll come to you. Some of the things I love hearing you talk about: key components, buy horses, put partners together with those horses, try to win races. Kind of simple, right? Be retain
Yes,
partners, recruit new owners, be honest, communicate, horses first, partners second, company third. I really like that one as well. We forget sometimes in a business like this that the horses can't talk for themselves. So we always got to do what's right by them. But for someone like you, it's got to be tricky sometimes because you're dealing with competitive owners. They all want to win. Trainers might have a different mindset, and you're the one that's right in the middle. But when you have that mindset of always putting the horses first, it can easily guide what you want to do.
absolutely, and that's a good way to describe it. Guides us to the North Star. And you know I think most owners, especially now with the the greater spotlight on aftercare and on really caring for horses, um, you know, so yes, it's pretty simple. And of course, the you know part of the challenging thing about running a partnership is you have somebody who's been in 10 years. You have some people that have owned horses on the uh, by themselves, others that are just like, hey, I'll throw an investment into this. I've never been involved. I don't know anything. So you basically have to meld those two together. And we're that's a constant learning process to try to do that. But ultimately there's got to be unity of command is a term that is used in the army. There has to be one final decision maker. And that's me, right? But I don't dictate to trainers, but ultimately as we work through these situations, you argue to the point of decision is another term that I got from the military, and it was so true. But once you make the decision, everybody has to rally around that decision and to move forward. So that's all part of it. But in terms of taking care of horses, like I'm very proud of the work that the industry has done. You think about 2019, a terrible, terrible stretch
Yep.
um, out at Santa Anita, but they weren't the only ones. It was across the spectrum. And you think about, you know, we would say we love horses, right? But then you would have somebody who would have a horse that would have some problems, and they say, "Well, let's just get him over to the paddock because they'll take him." And you say like, there's a disconnect there,
Yeah.
and so we basically have addressed that situation now. And I know we're talking, this is kind of on a tangent,
Sure.
but think about how good that is to now be be protecting these, especially claimers, because the claimers are the ones that need our help the most,
Absolutely.
right? The
And the
stake
owners,
horses,
the trainers to be kind of all protected. You don't want bad situations for these new people coming in, buy a horse, and all of a sudden that horse is lame and they're stuck with them.
yeah. So it's not perfect. We've had horses voided, void claims that we were like, no, that's just the way. But by and large, the stats are very, very good. That that system, the void claim system, is working. And I remember Dick Mandela. He kind of he dropped that concept on the industry 15 years ago, and obviously he's a senior statesman. I've never done a bit of business with him, but he's one of the people I respect the most in the industry. But sometimes it takes that long. And now look at these claimers um, are so much better off, and it's really attracting people that want to play the claiming game because it's not the Wild West anymore. So to anybody that that doesn't give credence to the fact that we've basically changed a big part of our culture in 6 or 7 years since that terrible stretch, I'd say like I'm I I don't know where you're coming from. If you can bring up the tough situations and the real challenges. You also got to look at our successes and celebrate our successes. I think when I hear people that are looking to get people really behind them, and they do both, they're a lot more apt to get people to follow them and to buy into what they're projecting, um, to improve the business. But you can't just be one-sided.
Yep. And for your barn, you can have all of the greatest intentions. You can have mottos and mantras. You can treat people great. But if you're not winning some races, they're not going to keep coming back over and over. So you have to have that mentality. Treat your partners with all the respect in the world, but you also have to be able to find some good ones. And you were really able to start doing that. Wanted to talk about some of the maybe memorable horses along the way. One horse who I felt like was running through a bunch of my life in Southern California, Awesome Gem, who you had back in 2006, was basically with your barn for like 6 years or so. Like,
Yeah.
what do you remember about him? He earns over $2 million. He's a grade one winner. He runs over 50 times. He must have been a really cool horse to have around.
Yeah, he helped us immeasurably. Probably, the impact of him at that time, Gino, of our evolution. Um, I- Obviously, Flightline, had a huge impact, but comparable to Awesome Gem because he kept us relevant all across the country. He was third in the Breeders' Cup, um, against Curlin. Um, and Hardspun finished second that day. We beat the Derby winner Street Sense right at the wire at Monmouth Park that year. So, I mean, he just danced every dance, and Craig DeLassy kept him going, and we bought him at a 2-year-old sale at Barrett's. They don't even have that sale anymore, and
Yeah.
he had a chip in both front ankles that we took out, and all he wanted to do was perform, and as honest as the day is long. And I'm not sure that we've seen a horse at that level run more than 50 times in a long time. It just doesn't happen anymore. And y- I'd, I'd say, needless to say, if we've had more Awesome Gem type horses, our game would be, it'd be more enjoyable and it'd be better overall for sure.
Because you become big fans of those horses. There were a couple others that I was big fans of yours. Macho again was a horse who had won some big races for you early on. He's second in the Preakness. I think a lot of people remember him from the big race with Rachel Alexander, with Rachel, where he almost runs her down there. And Twilight Eclipse is another. And they're these horses that they're good horses. They're grade one winners. But they're horses who are a little bit more throwback than we see nowadays. They ran a lot. They were sort of like these old school gritty horses who felt like you could do things with. Maybe a thought or two on Macho again and Twilight Eclipse.
Yeah. So one of the things is, for a long time after the Woodward, that was one of the best races and the best race calls of all time.
Yep.
I'm biased a little bit, but I think Tom Durkin would say the same thing. At 11:30, I live right across the street from Saratoga. At 11:30 every day, they check the sound system, and part of the checking the sound system would be the last quarter of a mile of the
Oh,
Woodward.
so
So,
you had
like
to
for
relive
three
that one.
years, I had to relive that one. But just a really cool horse. Robbie Alvarado rode him, and I said, what did Calvin Burrell say to you when you hit the wire together and you were galloping out? And he started to chuckle and he said, Calvin Burrell said you were never going to get by me even if we went another mile. So Robbie was like, yeah, you're right, Calvin. But she was some kind of filly. And I mean, to think that was really a historic day, a 3-year-old filly beating older grade one winners as soundly as she did. And, turning back everybody. And she turned us back too. So I mean, all the glory to her. But anyway, he was just a cool little horse. He was not a horse that anybody at a Kentucky Stallion farm would give a second look to. He was a little dude, and he was a little funky behind, but he just kept coming in his career. So Dallas Stewart did a wonderful job there. So.
And then Twilight Eclipse, you purchase early in his career after a couple starts. This guy's part of your team for almost 5 years or so, and I think takes you to 4 Breeders' Cups.
Yep. Yeah, he was a cool dude, and he was purchased as a short yearling for $1,000. He had run a couple. I think he had run up at Indiana in
Yep.
Indiana, and our boy Steve Castanola, who now works at TaylorMade, called me one day, and he said, "Why don't you get Aaron to come look at this horse? I might have a bead." So that's what happened, and Aaron went, really really liked him, and he was just a very athletic looking horse, and really put it together for a long time with us. And he finally got a grade one in what 2016, and right now lives and has lived for the last 10 years in Erin's backyard,
Awesome.
on her farm. So I get to see him quite a bit, so which is really really cool.
Now, everybody, I'm sure, will ask you about winning the big races like the Derby and like the Breeders' Cup. But what does it feel like with a horse like Commanding Curve, who's second in the Kentucky Derby? When you haven't won one yet, what does that feel like? Sure, you're excited for the big run and a good performance. He was a little bit of a long
Yeah.
shot going in, but then you're probably reliving that quite a bit, going, gosh, we were second in the Derby. Could this have been a little
Yeah.
different?
Yeah, so we did. I know I was in Dubai with Twilight Eclipse. Right, he didn't run very well, so it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're watching Fairgrounds, and he was Commanding Curve was kind of a suck up third at the Louisiana Derby. So I was like, we got a decent shot to get in. We didn't get in until like 3 or 4 days before, and then we were like, you know, let's give it a go. He's gonna put a run in, and you never know in the Derby. We saw in that particular year there were 3 or 4 horses that were probably going to be second. But they just got into a scramble, and there were like bumper cars, past the eighth pole, and we kind of swept up on the outside. And I remember, like, I didn't really see California Chrome in front because I was so focused on Commanding Curve, but I was like, man, we're going to win the Kentucky Derby, which was really, really, really fun. And I remember specifically, Gino, walking out of the Derby, I said, listen, I'm not going to ask for anything more, to of the Derby gods. Like I had about 8 or 9 seconds where I had the feeling we were going to win the Derby. And if that's all I ever get, I'm going to be very satisfied with my Derby experiences.
Well, you got a little bit more than that a few years later with Always Dreaming. Tell us about that process. When did you actually start getting involved with Always Dreaming? And then you finally feel those 8 or 9 seconds right where it all comes together.
Yeah. So in what 2011, Vinny and Teresa Viola, we got them into the game. Vinny is a West Pointer class of '77, and they wanted to do it in a big way, and so we bought some horses together. They developed their own broodmare band, and they had horses on their own, but we had continued to partner up, and so Always Dreaming had broke his maiden up at Tampa and had come back on Fountain of the Youth Day in the first race at Gulfstream and won an A other than going a mile and an eighth. And he was very slow. He had a 68 buyer. And I don't know, for some reason, a buddy of mine calls and, hey, why don't we talk to Vinny, see if he wants to sell a piece of Always Dream? And I was like, why would Vinny want to? He's a very substantial guy. Well, I, you know, one thing led to another, and he was like, yeah, I was just ready to do a deal with a stallion farm, but I'd rather do it with you to keep our options open. So it was really, if I make that call like 10 minutes later, the deal's already done
Wow.
with a stallion farm. So it just
Meant
timing
to
is
be,
everything.
right?
So yep. So we bought in right at the beginning of March of 2017. He wins the Florida Derby in 2000 or in April, and he goes to Kentucky as the tepid favored for the Kentucky Derby that year.
And another horse who is probably one that a lot of people don't know the name of, but I picked him out in particular because it was a big milestone for you, winning with Phantom Smoke, and that's win 1,000. Could you have ever imagined back in 91 then that you would have 1,000 victories and everything? Like when you hit big numbers like that, do you take a moment to reflect? Because I know you're probably so busy in what's happening day to day, but those are huge numbers where you can maybe step back and go, wow, we won 1,000 races.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny because I kind of draw the equivalent of when you win and you stand in the winner's circle, you get pretty cocky, right? There's nobody that comes out of the winner's circle without a whole lot of confidence. Like, I got
Yep.
this game figured out. It's very similar to on the golf course when you have a tough round, but then you birdie 18 and you walk off the course. You're like, I got this game,
Yep.
and then of course the next round. So
Humbles
the
you, right?
same thing. Yeah. So we win our 1,000th race, which, I mean, for an owner, obviously very, very proud, and all the accolades to the team and trainers. And then I look up and there's a big story about Steve Asmussen having won his 9,000th win, um, like the night before at a Remington Park or something. So we had run a bunch of horses and we hadn't got the win. I think we had Steve had run a horse the night before uh, at Lone Star, and we were like 3-5, and we end up getting beat. We finished second, and I was like, I don't know, maybe this is all falling into place, but it was very, very cool. And no, I thought a lot about that, to start at one at Parks and then to get to 1,000 at Saratoga with Irad Ortiz and a big group of very loyal partners. It was as good as it could be.
And then we can get to the big boy, undefeated grade one winner, 4.5 million in earnings. Flightline is the type of horse that every person in horse racing hopes their whole life to be around, to be involved with. I mean, you could use any adjective you want to describe him. When did you know, or maybe when were some of the first senses that this might be a special animal? He might be a little bit different. Did you guys get some of that sense early on?
We did. He had a very serious injury, a wound to his hind end, like 3 months into his 2-year-old year. So that March. So, but he had shown a lot even before then. But that probably made him who he was, because if not, he would have he would have got out. He would have won the Del Mar Futurity. We would have run him in the Breeders' Cup, and quite frankly, he didn't have a great-minded horse, but he was so uber talented. He would have run through a brick wall. And I just, you just think about God and you think about the grace that you get with a horse like this, and everything just fell into place. And um, but there are two times. One is when he started to work. Like I was at the sale, I had a big group of people at the sale. When he was a 3-year-old, I was at the 2-year-old sale in Ocala, and I was like, I wasn't even trying to, sell the horses that we had just bought. I wanted everybody to look at his work. And a guy said to me, I mean, he's already syndicated. You got this. Why don't you try to sell it? No, I said, look at this next work. That was one. And then a couple weeks later, so John Sadler wins the San Anita Derby with Rock Your World, who's a very nice horse, who could be a very, very interesting stallion. I like his progeny, but we're all congratulating him. And he said, well, I really like our San Anita Derby winner, but I got a horse that's probably 20 times better than him, and you guys own part of him. So I was like, yeah, right. And we had been with John for a lot of years, so the chain, he never touted, and he
No.
doesn't get over top. He's very, very confident in, the person that he is and the trainer that he is. So when he kind of, you know he kind of presented it like, the way he presented it, like, before he even ran, this could be a generational horse. I was like,
Wow.
that's like, that's something. And yeah, in his it just, he took your breath away at every turn.
Were you ever worried going into any races, or was there any moment during races where you actually thought he was going to get beat? He won with so much ease every time.
Yeah, I think in the Met Mile, I knew that, he was coming into New York, and he was the hype horse. It was Belmont Stakes, but the Met Mile kind of had as much hype around as the Belmont. And I figured, the New York riders, like, they're not going to let guys just, horses and a connection just come into New York. And he broke a step slow, and so Junior Alvarado did what I would want him to do if he was riding a horse for us. Race rode us, you know, 3 different times, and um, we had our stomachs in our throat for about 10 seconds, but he just backed out of there. They had sprinted away, so he had the ability to get out, and then he did his thing. But I think that was the first time he had any sort of adversity, and he passed with flying colors. But no, never used a crop on him. He never really had to consider another horse. He was in a league of his own.
And one thing that was very impressive throughout the entire journey, and I know one thing that you were proud of, he ran medication free, no Lasix, and that's something that shows you that it can be done, and the horses at the highest level can run without some of the drugs, and that is something that we can do moving forward. I know that you've talked about that a little bit, and it just shows that sometimes you don't need it with these horses. We become a little bit too much of a crutch leaning on things. Tell us a little bit about how you had that journey, and what went into that with him.
Yeah, so I think we knew, he his airway was that big, and he was a combination of Usain Bolt and Michael Jordan together. So we were never worried about him, and it was just right in the middle of the industry debate about Lasix. I think we're at a good point right now.
Yeah.
If you're, no 2-year-olds, and if you're a stake horse, you don't run on Lasix. I think that's a good compromise, and I think, it's done, it's over with. I think we're right, hopefully going to be lock that in, and because I think that's a good compromise, and I don't think people give enough credit to the industry and, getting to that point. But yeah, I think he was the best horse, um and he was the first really good horse of the change in our in our standards to bring us in sync with the rest of the world. So look, I just don't. I think everybody's learned how to do it. You really don't hear people talking about it anymore, and so I think it was probably overblown on both sides. I'm just glad it's hopefully an issue that's in the past with us.
When you have a great horse like that, you probably want this horse to be around forever. But he did really everything on track. He won the biggest races at the highest levels. What's the decision like when you have to retire him? Do you know going in already, okay, Breeders' Cup Classic and we're done? Is there part of you that wants to test it out more and see if he can do more? Or were you very fine with saying, yeah, we know that this horse, he battled all his battles and we're good?
Yeah, I don't think anybody was fine with the trying to put together the economic reality. You had a horse that the day or 2 days after the Breeders' Cup was had an implied valuation of 184 million, right? And trying to put together helping the industry because we knew this was he was a horse that really you know to some extent got past the inner workings of our industry.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was bittersweet, there's no doubt. And nobody that was nobody had a majority in the partnership. And you're right, um, I mean, we were just like, gosh, it's we go back and forth. And for all those years I would see good horses retire and I would be like, I'll be different. Well, you we had partners that we had to represent. And we had a fiduciary responsibility to do the right thing for them. So um in a blaze of glory he goes out, but his first yearlings are here. It's happened that quick. But of course there's no doubt I would have loved to have had that feeling several more times in 2023 of the build up to his races. It just wasn't to be.
And I have a quote from our producer, Lucia, who you and I were talking to earlier. She said this to me,
Yeah.
and she didn't want me to share it, but she said, Flightline had the power to make everyone at the track just pause and watch him in awe. He was like watching a sunset. It was a very cool horse. So even the fans at all levels, he was one of those types of horses, Terry, a true horse of a lifetime that made everybody stop and go, wow.
Yep. Yep. My take on that is I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that. He was like
Please.
a sunset.
Yep.
Um, but I remember specifically the dichotomy when you're at the Derby, you win. Everybody is either trying to get through the traffic jam or they're handicapping the last couple races. And you're like, you walk through the crowd and you're like, hey, I just won the Kentucky Derby. But, everybody's scattered. Well, I remember specifically, it will be a moment and a memory I'll have with me forever, is when he comes back, the whole apron at Keeneland and the whole box, like nobody left. It was like they was there. And he he came back. There wasn't a lot of fanfare. He didn't go up and back and everything. He just stood there and he just looked at the crowd. And Flavian Pratt was as proud as a papa. But that's one thing, just the sound and the density of the population um at that at Keeneland that day was just striking. And we all, as we've grown up in the industry, we've watched Secretariat, we've watched Seabiscuit. Not saying that that was an exact scene, but that was pretty darn close to see all those racetrackers and all the fans see there and really cherish the performance that he had put forth on Breeders' Cup in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
He will be remembered as a horse in that tier, one of the greatest of all time. So for you, you've won the Derby, you've won the Breeders' Cup Classic, you've won some big races, some of the biggest races. What are races that are on your own personal bucket list? What would be some ones that you haven't won that you would love to personally?
Yeah. Travers obviously is being from the East Coast, that would be one. I know my wife, she would love to win the Kentucky Oaks. I would too. Um, uh, those would be the two. There are plenty of other ones, right? You know, in the past, like before we had the honor to win those races, we were like, just I remember it was a long time before we won a grade one. We didn't win our first grade one until 2007. And so um you just take them as they come. I mean, you really do. You cherish, especially the grade ones, because you know that that's what everybody's shooting for, and it takes a special horse, and it takes things to really snap into place. In addition to a lot of luck, so that doesn't get past me how um, how many things have to go right to win a big race, and that just adds to the coolness of being around these good horses, because they are it's a real honor to be around a good horse, because that there's something different about them.
We got into this a little bit, Terry, but we've now seen HISA around the horse racing governing body for a couple years. They've had their hands in. How do you think this is going so far overall for the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a big proponent of HISA, starting probably in 2016 or 17. So I've been to hearings. I know there's a faction of our industry, mostly the trainers, a good number um, of the people that operate in the mid ranges and below. Um, there's some things that I know have to get fixed. The funding mechanism. I know it's an unfunded mandate. I know that the penalty system has had some really rough edges. I know that there's some things that the Phil Surfy case, that I struggle to get my arms around, and so
It's
that's
not
on one
perfect,
side.
right?
It's not perfect. I know one thing. Here's a couple things. One is it's a federal law, so we you can't shoot the messenger. Like Lisa Lazarus is doing what a federal law dictates that she do as the CEO of HISA. So I f- I ba- I'm appalled at some of the pushback that has been so strong. I got no problem with pushback. I do have a problem when it gets personal,
Yes.
and it's basically throw in the kitchen sink. That's where I think the horsemen, in particular the trainers, have been really let down by their leaders, and knowing that, like, what are we supposed to do, just abolish everything? Like, it's a federal law. So that's one thing. And look, you ask any trainer and you look them in the eye and you say, do you think that the playing field is more level and safer than it was pre 2020? I have yet to find somebody that doesn't look away when I ask them that question. So when I say to guys, you were the guys that were complaining
Before.
and
Yeah.
griping and up in the trainer stand, this guy's cheating, that's guy cheating, and now you're complaining against about Heisa. So which is it? Which is it? We got something that is a work in progress, but you don't see any more guys at 34% that are winning the training title at Monmouth 18 years in a row, whatever it is,
Yeah.
18 years in a row, i.e., the guys that are in jail or they're ready to be deported. So at some point, something's got to give. You have to you have to bet the come, and I'd much rather bet the come with Heisa than bet the come with the structure that we're going to go back to if Heisa is abolished. I
Completely
think
agree, right? If you're looking
I
at
don't think that's a
nothing's going to be perfect and nothing is going to be able to appease everybody, but this is the process, the starting of the process, and we are in a way better spot right now than we were just a few years ago.
Absolutely. And so and I know some people that, especially one guy who's been ranting and raving about this or that, and we've spent 80 million for two bad tests or what. No, here's the other thing I'd offer to you and to everybody. Ask the jocks if they walk out of the jocks room with more confidence
Yeah.
that they're going to come back in one piece, and they're not going to have
Safe.
you're gonna come out. You know that these horses have been checked, and a lot of agita, a lot of frayed nerves. But ask a jock, and to tell you, everyone that I haven't gone far and wide, but the guys that I know right away, yes, and it was very welcome. And I think we've saved lives, and I think we've saved a lot of injuries um, with the changes. But let's keep working on the things that need to be changed and need to be smoothed out. Is I think something every reasonable person buys into.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process. You can be critical of some things without saying, we need to just scrap it completely. And I agree with you. I think too many people have taken that stance where, oh, I don't like one aspect of this. I'm completely done with it. This is new. This is something that you got. It's like a little trial and error. You have to figure out exactly what's right. You talked about some of the punishments, some of the rulings. They're going to get it figured out a little bit better. It's not an exact science, honestly, and that's what makes it difficult. There isn't really a previous uh, body like this that you can use as an example, Terry. It's just something that's brand
Yeah,
new.
yeah, absolutely. So I'll leave you with this on the Heisman discussion. Most of the significant trainers and owners and players in the industry have Lisa Lazarus' cell phone. And while I don't call her a lot, if I hear or see something that she could address or should address, like I don't think it's been more than an hour, the 4 or 5 times I called her, and everybody says the same thing. Like, think about that. I wouldn't know who the head of the racing commission is in New York, or other states. Now, Kentucky, obviously, racing is more of a way of life and it's more embedded into the fabric, but you get what I'm saying. Like, we have access to the true, uh, the difference makers in
Decision makers
HISA,
too. Yeah.
and 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 it's happened for years now that they've affected change, but they can't go in there just arguing and ranting and raving. They have to come with a thesis, and they have to provide a solution, and sell that solution. When that's happened, I think oftentimes that changes have been made that were very good.
Okay, we've got some fun questions for you here, Terry, as we get towards the end of our interview. If you weren't CEO of West Point, what for a living, what might you be doing?
I I thought about that. I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. I guess I'd be in the corporate world.
Sure.
I A lot of my friends, they sell drugs for pharmaceutical companies, or they're in the financial world. But both of those are a distant second to the spot I'm in now.
Not nearly as much fun as you're having right now. No, no way. What kind of things do you and your wife or are you doing when you're not at the track and you're not working? I know that's not very often, but anytime that you're away, what do you do in your free time?
Yeah, I'm really starting to get into golf.
Nice.
It took a long time, but golf's about time and about putting in the effort. So that's one of the things actually my wife and I are starting to do together. So we did a lot in Saratoga, and we'll continue here in Kentucky and then in Florida when we go for the winter.
Any movies, TV shows that you're into currently, and do you have a favorite horse racing movie?
Um, I it's a photo finish between Secretariat and Seabiscuit,
Yep.
both very very good, good shows. Um, I've always said I love the Shawshank
Oh,
Redemption
great movie. All
is
time
a great
great.
movie. So
Yeah.
when we're going from Kentucky to Saratoga, we drive, and we that's in Ohio. I never knew that, but there's a Shawshank. That prison is, and I'm gonna get the one day. I'm gonna pull off, and I'm gonna go see the Shawshank Prison. Um, or whatever it's called. So that would be one. But Netflix is great. One of the shows I'd offer to you, it's on Amazon Prime. It's a, a, a documentary about Frankel, and about his trainer.
Awesome.
Um, I've watched it 3 or 4 times. It's called Frankel, the Super Horse, and it's a
Awesome.
very moving, very well done documentary.
How about music? Do you have a playlist? Are you listening to anything old or current?
I you know I grew up outside of Philly, so it was a Motown.
Sure.
But broad spectrum. Metallica obviously came to the Kentucky Derby this year, so I'd never really been a you know someone that listened. I wouldn't say not a fan, but I really started to get into them, and I think it's a good time because you can reflect back on the artists that you may not have really listened to a lot as you were growing up, but now you have a little bit better sense of what they were trying to communicate in their songs.
Right?
And
Yeah.
I like music. I really do, and it's a fascinating world, and it's a big world, right? It's amazing that the range, and the spectrum of artists and what they're putting out, and they put out every day.
Sports. Any sports or any teams that you follow?
Yeah, so obviously Eagles, they won last night.
Yep.
It was a great game. Um, the Phillies are big time.
Yeah.
Um, I mentioned Vinny Viola, and I know he's got a lot of friends. That I don't mean to name drop, but he purchased the Florida Panthers in 2013, and they were, I mean, most likely should have been considered the worst professional franchise
Yeah.
in all of sport, right? And um, and now it's they lead the league. People are beating down their door to play hockey in South Florida, and to experience. I was there with my wife and my grandson for Game 6 when they won the Stanley Cup, and that environment was as good as I think any sporting event I've ever been to. And so that's a long way of saying the Panthers are another passion for me and the family.
Anyone that hasn't been to live hockey games, even if you're not a hockey fan, the experience being live, especially when you're in like the first 5 rows and you're right by the ice, you can
Yes,
feel the cold, and when it reverberates around you when someone gets checked into the boards. Like, I'm not even a huge hockey fan. I didn't play a lot growing up in Southern California, but the experience going to a hockey game is the best on any short list of experiences in sports. So good.
I agree. I agree. I'd highly advise it, and obviously you do as well. So I'd say get to an NHL game for sure.
What are some of your favorite tracks to visit or to run at?
Um, Obviously Saratoga and Keeneland are the two big ones.
Yeah.
Super excited about the new Belmont. That's going to be world class. Um, and you know, I think about growing up. All the harness tracks I went to, a good portion of them aren't around anymore. But Delaware Park is still somewhere I love to go. And I mean Santa Anita. They have a mural of Flightline right at the bottom of the escalator, which is always pretty cool because you think about how long that place has been in operation, and there's only one mural. I know Zenyatta has a statue. Ironically, you talked about David and Gordo. He bought Zenyatta and he bought Flightline
Wow.
at public auction, and to have those two be commemorated at Santa Anita, I thought was a feather in his cap for sure.
It's not bad card to have in your hand when you go talk to somebody in a meeting or something. Like, I got these horses,
Yes,
Flightline and Zenyatta. Not a few bad
yes.
ones to have found. So this has got to be I'm very curious for you as someone who's been all over the world. If you could pick a vacation spot to go to, or if you get a little bit of time off, what are some of your favorite places to visit?
Yeah. So, yeah, we have been all over the world. I love to go to Japan. Obviously, the dramatic improvements that they've had in the thoroughbred industry, and they're not stopping. And I'd love to participate one, but I think Japan would be a really good because they're um, I don't know. They've kind of taken a different path after the Second World War, and they're a different culture, and the vision of their leaders, I think, has all put them in a spot where they're really a significant player in world culture and trade and business, and so I'd say Japan.
After a big winning day, and we know you guys have many of those, are there particular restaurants you go to for celebrations? Do you have like your local spot in Saratoga after a good day there?
Yeah, the go-to place that we have is Mamma Mia's, which is over in the strip mall, over on the west side of town, and that's it's a good place when you see a lot of those old time trainers time and time again, and the owners and everybody associated. We're that's one thing. If you look at the people that travel, the racing, the circus, if you will, that goes from town to town, that's one thing that really brings us all together is eating. And those trainers especially, they know their restaurants, and they know good places to fill their belly. So I'd highly recommend Mamma Mia's in Saratoga.
One thing I've always respected about you and West Point, Terry, you personally get involved with a lot of different organizations, a lot of different charities. You give as much of your time back as possible. Through the years, elected member of the Jockey Club, board of the Breeders' Cup, New York Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association, and the Jockey Club, the Thoroughbred Chaplaincy, the Belmont Child Care Association. And I was reading about how much West Point puts into retired racehorses. So, I mean, I covered a lot right there, but let's maybe talk about a few of the organizations or anything that you want to mention, because I know there
Yeah.
are some really great charitable organizations out there that the people would love to get involved with.
Yeah, so the one that I spend most time with is a New York Thoroughbred race or chaplaincy. Uh, right, Chaplain Berto Chavez is the leader. He's been at the helm for over 15 years, and you know they really do the God's work on the backstretch. If we all know what the demographic is of the majority of our backstretch workers. Most of them are not from, they're from another country. Most of them have family back there, and they're here, and they're working hard. They're working extremely tough hours and long days, and I just think they deserve it. What else can you say? They deserve people that are benefiting from their hard work. And I always see, as an aside, you'll never see any of us walk a horse into a winter circle after a win. And the reason is because you look at the faces of those grooms, um, that bring horses to the paddock, and they get a chance to win. Like, that's their one
It's
chance
their moment.
it's their moment. And while I'm okay, I just I'm I understand that other owners do it. I think you're doing a disservice to those grooms and that team, of the trainers. So we can never do enough, and it's really about resources. We have the right teams in these places around the country. It's about providing them the resources. So that's one of my biggest jobs in the role as the chairman of the chaplaincy, is to bring people in to tell the chaplain story, and to gather resources to give it to the people that can really make a difference, and really, um, provide a compounding effect of an amount of money that's going to have an outsized impact on about a in New York, about 1,000 people that work on our backsides. So that's there. On the horse side, we early on, Aaron, my daughter, and some other members of the team started a retirement charity for our horses. And every syndication that we do, we basically fund a 401k, and it's called the Kanji DeVito Black and Gold Fund. And so, yeah, I'd like to think that we're walking the walk and we're tracking horses that get claimed and go to far off circuits, and we're buying horses. We're not doing anything special. I think we're doing what every owner should do, and a lot of owners do, and we just got to get more owners to walk the walk, and that's really my message.
And that is one thing that I will take out of this conversation with you. You're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You have very simple messaging that you just stay consistent with. And you want to make sure people really know, believe, and trust in what you are presenting. You're not going out there and saying, we're going to do this different, we're going to do that different. We're just going to be consistent to you. We're going to be honest with you. We're going to try to treat people right at all levels. I love it. You said always wanted to enhance the health and welfare of the men and women who take care of our horses. Because if you're not taking care of them, your horses aren't going to be taken as good of care of, in even just the real selfish way, right?
Yes. Well, there's no doubt. And look, we're not going to talk politics, obviously, but the the stress in the last couple months on
Sure.
our back stretches around the country has been elevated substantially. And while we haven't seen outside of the Delta, the rate on the backstretch, I that's always a chance. There's always that possibility, but as a result, you have people that are away from home, their stress level has gone up, alcohol and drugs. They're, while not rampant, they're still there. They're in every part of society, but the very positive thing is we have programs to address those. We have basically a system, a support system, in New York and around the country, that I know trainers and owners really use extensively to take care of their people and to help get people in front of the right organizations. And I think that's really one of the keys, is to make sure when a person has an issue that they're in a very timely manner put in front of the right people, and the right organization. When that happens, you get people that want help. They want help. They want to do the right thing, by and large. And it's a really good system that we want to keep getting better and better.
Terry, final thing before we let you go, we're going to be able always checking in on the West Point Thoroughbred website, because you always are updating, letting people know all about your horses. Two horses that are the future maybe of West Point. And we talked about some of the great horses through the years. We just saw one of them run very, very well in Curtain Call. And I think Ewing is pointing to a race at Keeneland. Where can we see those two future stars?
Yeah. So Curtain Call, obviously, the winner. I got to be careful. It was Ted Noffey, which switches Ned Toffee, who's a great friend, and I've always been a big admirer of his and the Spendthrift operation. But I know Mark Cassie said, we're going to take Curtain Call to any place that he's not at. Unfortunately, though, he's going to run in the futurity, and we're going to run Ewing in the futurity. So we'll probably run Curtain Call in the Champagne, and we'll take our shots. The big boys are starting to come out, and I just thought, I thought Ted Noffey was interesting because they really didn't bet him a lot in his first start. We ran against him in his first start. He ran well, but I didn't expect that performance. And he was 7-2. So to say that he jumped forward is probably an understatement. And I would think he's probably favored for the Breeders' Cup at this point. But a lot can and usually does change. So we're trying to stay in the mix.
Terry, I feel like I could have sat here and talked with you for like 5 hours. We asked you for like 30, 45 minutes, and you gave us basically double that. It was such a great conversation.
Pleasure.
It was so nice getting to know you a little bit, and we really appreciate all the time. We just want to thank you so much.
Absolutely. Keep up the great work. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Off the Track podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Amazon, Audible, Spotify, and on YouTube. We'd always love to hear from you in the comments section. Make sure you're tuning in next week for another very special guest.